Despite her academic chops, Gerber was and remains a genuine Hanford booster. It was clear to me after reading the book that something was undeniably missing from her extensive research, which at times seemed like a revisionist take on Hanford's very deadly past. I needed to see, feel, and experience it for myself. Having grown up in Billings on the dry plains of eastern Montana, I felt on familiar ground when I first visited the town of Richland, Washington, just a stone's throw from Hanford's cordoned-off boundary. The town and its landscape reminded me of where I was raised. The topography was similar. The light blue sky was expansive, cloudless, and the air cold and crisp. The Columbia River cuts through Richland much like the Great Yellowstone River does in Billings. It dragged me in. Unlike Billings, however, Richland had a different, darker, and more complex identity, and I could sense it. It wasn't a resource extraction town or an agricultural community like its neighbors Pasco or Kennewick. There were no ski slopes nearby, no fine dining or fancy vacation rentals packed full of well-heeled tourists. It was a town with an entirely different history, a past it is still openly proud of. Richland has heartily embraced the cruel bombs it helped to create, and with them the destruction they caused. It was an odd thing, considering the thousands of lives these weapons shattered and the ecological ruin left in their wake, much of it in their own backyard. Even so, Richland's hubris is on display wherever one turns. The local ale house, boorishly named Atomic Ale Brew Pub, showcases beers like Plutonium Porter, Half-Life Hefeweizen, and even the Atom Bustin' IPA. The kitschy logo over at the local Richland High School, home of the Bombers, brandishes a mushroom cloud exploding out of a giant R. And the local hardware store, which peddles T-shirts with the high school's emblem, sells out every time government officials fly in from Washington, D.C. A fervent, mystifying patriotism still runs deep in Richland, and there is no mistaking that it's die-hard Republican country. Benton County, where Richland is located, voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump twice, most recently by a 20% margin over the Biden-Harris ticket. Like other cities and regions across the United States, legislators in these parts have introduced anti-trans bills, and when protesters were bussed in from Portland for a recent anti-nuke rally, few, if any, locals joined in the festivities. However, what sets the place apart from other rural towns in the West that overwhelmingly vote Republican is that Richland is one of the most educated cities in the entire country, leading all others in PhDs per capita. In other ways, too, Richland breaks the mold of what a rural conservative stronghold looks like. That is, of course, until you peek under the hood to reveal that this place, with a population of nearly 50,000, was born out of the United States' nuclear ambitions during World War II and is still very much run like a covert military operation, fully dependent on government contracts to keep its economy steaming ahead. My first visit to Richland was short, but I found myself enthralled. I spent 2 days roaming around town, drinking my fair share of the Half-Life Hefe, and hiking the White Bluffs overlook above the Columbia River, which was once home to the native Wanapum and Nez Perce. Having recently moved back to Oregon from New York, I knew I would return, and did a few years later with my girlfriend Chelsea. I didn't share much about my intentions when I coaxed her to come along for a weekend getaway. I remember billing the trip as an exploration of sorts to the edge of Washington, where we would taste the wines of the Walla Walla region, one of the best grape-growing locales in the Pacific Northwest. Lucky for me, Chelsea likes wine. Also lucky for me, Walla Walla is just a short drive over to Hanford. I also conveniently forgot to tell Chelsea that this excursion was scheduled around the public opening of one of Hanford's oldest and most notorious buildings. At noon on a chilly Saturday in September 2009, Chelsea and I joined a group of mostly elderly tourists. We packed ourselves onto a small bus in Richland to visit Hanford's B reactor.